the Aftershock with Robert Jonas and Alex Morgan. I'm Phil Leyva, and we are here at PayPal Park after a 0-0 draw against Toronto FC for the San Jose Earthquakes. We're going to be getting into the press conference here pretty quickly, so I'm going to go ahead and kick it over to you first, Robert, if you can give us your initial thoughts after the match.
Well, I could use a cup of coffee, but besides that small detail, it was a Toronto team that, Alex, you were prepared. It was a Toronto team that seemed pretty content to just keep the center of the field clogged up and dared the Quakes to try to get stuff out on the wings. And they did at times. We saw Espinoza get some space. We saw Cade get some space, but it just wasn't enough all around. Jeremy was very absent today, and the center just didn't get his opportunities. And, when you don't have your offense clicking like that, then, you're going to end up with a scoreless draw.
Yeah. And Alex, what are your thoughts? What are you seeing here during this match? And you were pretty critical on Twitter. I saw that right before I hopped onto the show here. A snooze fest.
Well, I had the same reaction as Robert. Thankfully, I'm in the comfort of my own home, so I was able to get some caffeine, and now I'm wide awake. But I nearly fell asleep at the end of that one, gentlemen. It looked, from my vantage point, lethargic. There was a lack of intensity across the pitch. This is a home game, and I expect more of this Earthquakes team, especially of Cade Cowell and Benji Kikanovic. We saw both of them starting tonight for the first time ever, possibly. First time I can remember, at least, in that 4-4-2 formation. And they both had chances to put the Quakes ahead. Neither of them took it. Neither of them looked aggressive enough, particularly Benji Kikanovic. I just wasn't seeing the confidence and aggressiveness that we know he can bring. And that was surprising to me, given that this felt like a good opportunity for the Quakes to pick themselves up again after a tough loss against St. Louis last week. It felt a little bit like some of that, insecurity was lingering. Some of the bad energy was lingering in this team today.
Yeah, and one of the things that was quite difficult for the team, and actually Toronto had this as well, is they were missing players, right? The Quakes were missing players. They were without Jamiro Montero because he's on international duty. Same thing with Miguel Trauco. And so they had to find other options going into the match. So we had Baldisimo starting. We had quite a different looking midfield than I think what we were anticipating coming into the season. Also Carlos Carrezo with the injury as well. So considering the makeup that Luchi had to go with, the standard 4-4-2, as we quickly pointed out, Robert, kind of what were you seeing there in the midfield and how they were able to make up for the loss of Grueso and Jamiro Montero, the two starters?
Yeah, it seemed like with that formation, this is not something we've seen out of the Quakes for quite a long time, and they looked a little bit rusty. And you had a player in there, and Michael Baldisimo playing, starting, for the first time with these Earthquakes. He was feisty. I think we both kind of looked at each other when he got stuck in a couple times there. So that was encouraging. But with Jackson sort of paired with him and playing kind of in those two roles in the center midfield, it didn't seem like the chemistry was there. Understandably, of course, they probably only practiced together this week, and I think that it just really limited things. So when you had Cade sort of playing as a second forward or trying to drop down sometimes and play into that midfield, it didn't seem like it was a smoothly running operation.
Yeah, and I think we kind of pointed out too how differently Jackson Yueill looked without having Carlos Grueso to rely on in that sort of defensive position, the number 6 position, right? If we're talking a more traditional number setup for the 4-4-2 formation. And so, Alex, I'm kind of curious as to your thoughts here. We had Baldisimo starting the match. We had Jackson Yueill. Things are looking a little bit different in the midfield than we're used to. Your thoughts?
Look, these absences aren't an excuse. There's no surprise absences tonight. It's the international window. The Quakes knew they were going to be missing Montero. They knew they were going to be missing Shakiris. They knew they were going to be missing Grueso. They knew all of these absences were coming. And let me tell you, if you think the Quakes have it bad, Toronto have it even worse. And they're on the road. They're missing, their entire midfield and up top, Insigne. They had it worse in terms of injuries.
They literally had to call in like fresh players off of their academy.
If you want to know how bad it is for Toronto, they signed 2 new academy players to their second team yesterday, and they were in the squad for Toronto tonight. So there's no comparing, the two situations that the teams are in. The Quakes were the healthier, more available squad this week. and they weren't able to take advantage of that. And you look at that midfield, and you wonder if there's enough creative spark in there without Jamiro Montero. I mean, he's been absent for 2 games now, and the Quakes really haven't looked the same. They're not getting those balls in behind quick enough. They're not, there's on the ball in possession is one thing, but the other thing that Montero contributes is that press and that energy off of the ball to win the ball in high spaces, to keep the opposition in the final third. That's just not something they really had today, especially in the first half. You see it a little bit more in the second half. The second half adjustments that Luchi Gonzalez has made have been good, and the Quakes look more dangerous in the second half tonight. But there's just not enough energy, intensity, press in that final third. And then when they did get the ball out wide, it just felt like all of the momentum that they had got sucked out because Benji Kikanovic and Cade Cowell kept losing it.
It's interesting that you mentioned that about the energy, because one of the things that Robert and I were talking about during the match was kind of how we saw a lot of Carlos Capo, and we saw a lot of Rodriguez pushing forward to try to create a lot of what was happening there. A lot of the attack on from the fullback position from Capo. But then I noticed, Robert, you had quite a bit of notes in regards to Rodriguez and actually getting onto the end of some of those plays, whether it was the corner kicks or basically he was finding himself more in an attacking position.
He was. I mean, we saw a few of those marauding runs forward, where he gets himself into position, and he just kept going up there. And he runs right into the box. He's got the hand up. He's looking for the cross from the outside, and it was very aggressive in that manner. And had a couple of plays on the set pieces, on the corner kicks, where you expect him to be up there, but also a number of attacking sequences. We saw him getting himself involved, and that was the kind of spark that Alex, you're speaking of, that energy and trying to get something out of it. He did seem to, in the second half, take on that role as a catalyst and tried to get a bit more happening. And on some nights you get a couple of goals out of that intensity and in that effort, but tonight that was not going to be the case. Sean Johnson made the save he had to make on Jackson, and that was really the kind of the end of it for San Jose.
Look, Rodriguez was San Jose's most dangerous player in the final third today. Yeah, he had at least 3 headed opportunities that came close that he might have been able to put in the back of the net. And when your center back is your most dangerous offensive player, that's a problem. That means that the rest of the players aren't doing their job. And look, Rodriguez's energy is a good thing. I think that him and Jonathan Mensah have been probably San Jose's 2 standout players so far this season, but it's further ahead of them. That's the problem. It's the midfielders and the wide players not being able to get involved, not being able to put Toronto FC on the back foot. This wasn't a game where I felt like the Quakes were in control on the front foot in the same way that we saw them against Atlanta United, against Vancouver Whitecaps in the first few games of the season. It felt like they were meeting Toronto FC at their level. It felt like a bog fest in there.
And if you possession numbers don't mean everything, but I mean, Toronto was kind of leading the possession for especially the first half and for quite a good stretch of the game. And they were just attacking up that right hand side with Bernardeschi, and Paul Marie did a fabulous job, I thought. Kind of a weird yellow, but he was constantly getting stuck in there and kind of keeping Toronto at bay. But that seemed to be Toronto's whole thing. They were going to overload that right hand side. They were going to keep defensive on Espinoza and prevent a lot going down the Quakes left hand flank. And it seemed like the Quakes were more reacting to it than sort of pressing it away or taking the initiative in that, especially in that first half.
And I really thought, you mentioned Paul Marie looked impressive. I think about the 83rd minute, I mean, his agility and like his fitness, it was still there. That was especially impressive aside from his play. So being able to bottle up a player the caliber of Bernardeschi and then continue to play at that level on a yellow card, mind you, right? Because he had to really play with that in the back of his mind as well. To continue to do that, I think is a very impressive showing for Paul Marie. So the fullback position a year ago was one of the biggest question marks for this team, whether or not this is something they could solve, right? And suddenly we have Trauco, who's off on Peruvian international duty. We have Carlos Acapo, who's playing very well on his side. And then we have Paul Marie, who can come in and fill in when they're not going to be available. So I think we have some pretty quality options here.
Look, the most entertaining part of that game was watching Paul Marie repeatedly keep Bernardeschi in his back pocket, because Bernardeschi probably has the worst attitude of any Major League Soccer player that I've seen in a few years. I mean, the extent to which he was pouting, he was yelling at his teammates, he was refusing to defend, and then asking his teammates to track back for him. And then when he got the ball, he was taking it down the wing, taking on 10 men, and then, hefting a shot on goal from 40 yards. Yeah, he had a hilarious performance on that right wing, and it was nice to see Paul Marie shut him down.
Yeah, it's really, the question is though, can Paul Marie be consistent from match to match, right? Because he seems to have, like, every match there might be one moment where it's questionable as to the decision he made or the play that he's making. So, like, if Marie continues to get these starts, can he be consistent? On the other end, though, speaking of consistency, I really thought Christian Espinoza was fantastic throughout the night in terms of his ball delivery, like creating the few chances that the Quakes had. I think Espinoza was a very large part of that.
Yeah, and I think Toronto was ready for it, but you can only be ready so much, and that was what was nice. So there were, I did note a couple of the, the opportunities. The fullbacks for Toronto were able to kind of cut the crosses out, but they were getting corner kicks out of those. So there were plenty of opportunities in the way we expect Christian Espinoza to deliver, and and it was just I'll bring back. I think I said in the beginning, Jabo was he was out there for 90 minutes, I believe, but I'm not sure how many kind of impacts he made in this game.
Yeah.
Alex, you're kind of shaking your head there for a second when we're talking about Espinoza. I mean, are you seeing something different than what we're seeing here?
Espinoza, always fantastic. No complaints about Espinoza. I am a little more skeptical of the narrative that the Earthquakes were creating lots of chances and were dangerous in the final third. They put in lots of crosses, that's for sure. But it felt like they were aimless crosses. It felt like they didn't have a strong idea of what they wanted to do with the ball. Can you think of one moment that the Quakes had in that game of playing a through ball in behind, of playing a few quick passes and then ripping a shot on target? I can't think of many of those chances where they're playing direct, down the middle, progressive passes. It felt like sometimes crossing because they didn't know what else to do. And so that's why I wasn't as optimistic, happy with the way that this team performed today.
Well, they were just getting swarmed every time they got into the half circle at the top of the box. I mean, there were 3 or 4 or 5 Toronto players just cutting the ball out, and all the little dancing in the world wasn't going to get the ball loose to anyone. Again, I think that's where Bobasi was just not able to make an impact. He just did not have any space to turn. The Quakes' best first half opportunity did come up from the wing. It was Akapo taking a pass from Espinoza after Cade Cowell had gotten loose and gotten the ball up the field, and I think it was Benji on the end of it who kind of steered it wide of the goal in the 6th or 7th minute. And it seemed like that was like a really good sequence. A lot of guys got a touch on the ball. I think Paul Marie was the first one to touch that ball and stealing it from Bernardeschi. And so you had everyone involved, and it looked like, oh, okay, this could be something. And you're right, Alex, that was probably the last time in the first 45 that we saw that kind of sequence take place. I didn't say dangerous when I said Espinoza was getting crosses in. Keep in mind, we didn't see enough of the runners into places to get to those balls. And even when they were, I think, we saw Tommy Thompson do what Tommy Thompson could do, which unfortunately wasn't enough tonight when he did have a few of those crosses or got near the end of those crosses. And again, just not enough out of those guys. So I think Espinoza is probably going to come out looking pretty good stats wise, but unfortunately no one on the end of him to capitalize on those.
Alex, you had mentioned that the subs were one of the moments in the match that actually made a difference here, that the subs that Luchi chose were actually impactful for the team. And I'm curious as to like what particularly you were seeing, because yes, I think the statistics would support what you're saying, what you were saying, but I'm just a little curious, like, could you reflect upon exactly what it was you saw that made the difference for the team?
Well, I think the Quakes looked better in the second half, even before they made those substitutions. I think that they came out with more energy, with more intensity. I think they were pressing higher up the field. I think they looked better in the second half before they made those substitutions. And then, when you put Tommy Thompson in and you go back to the 4-2-3-1, the 4-3-3 formation, they just looked more comfortable with the passing through the midfield. Having that number 10, that point person to direct the play, they were getting the ball in dangerous areas and keeping it there. Defensively, keeping those players in the final third, keeping the ball in the final third, pressing Toronto and keeping that ball high is what made them look better in the second half. And that's been a theme this season. I think it's almost the anti-Matias Almeida. Matias Almeida's teams were strong in the first half and then completely collapsed because they got tired in the second half. Luchi Gonzalez's teams thus far have looked tepid, mild in some of these home games in the first half, and then really applied the pressure in the second half. And I think the Quakes did have people on the end of those crosses. They did have guys who were there in the final third. It's just Benji Kikanovic and Cade Cowell weren't putting the ball in the back of the net. And I want to focus on Benji Kikanovic because he's had an opportunity to start in this game. He's had a couple opportunities to get more minutes in these last few games. And, we were expecting him to be challenging Tommy Thompson for that starting role. Right now, it looks like they're both playing to see who can be on the bench because neither of them have put in enough. And especially with Benji today, I was surprised about just the lack of confidence. He wasn't pressing high in the final third. He didn't look decisive in the final third in the way that he has in the past. And maybe it's because he's on the wing. Maybe, one of our colleagues, Dasher Cohn, would say, look, Benji Kikanovic is a number 9 born and bred, and he looks lost on the left wing. If you talk to Asher Cohn, if you're in the Quakes Epicenter Slack channel, you can join as a patron for $5 a month. That's what Asher Cohn is saying in there. He's always the one to remind us Benji Kikanovic is a number 9. And I think Benji Kikanovic can play well on the wing, but tonight I was more inclined to agree with Asher. He just looked a little lost out there. And look, there's comments here about the offer that he had from AEK Athens over the winter break. Maybe there's still over there. Some lingering regret in the back of his head about that deal not going through. I'm just, games like this make me question where his head's at and where his mentality is right now.
Well, I think when you're not getting the starts as well, when you have somebody who's playing in front of you, of course you're going to be, you're going to have that drive to get the starts. But if you're not actually there getting the minutes from the beginning of the match, I'm sure that has some sort of, that's going to affect his performance. But I mean, this is all speculative, right? This could be something that changes over the course of the season. Who knows? But I did want to kind of press a little bit more on Cade Cowell here because he seems to continue to be a polarizing figure amongst fans because he's not finishing his chances, right? We did see him get at least one really solid chance off a rebound tonight. This was off the corner kick that Christian Espinoza took. And then I believe it was off of the Jackson Ewell shot from outside the box. That's, Cade was there. He could have put away the chance, but he hasn't been necessarily putting away the chances. He hasn't had the stats on his side yet. And at the same time, you're seeing him create space in certain areas that perhaps other guys without his skill set are going to create. The question is, though, is any of this going to come to fruition? And is he going to lose that spot possibly to Benji Kikanovic or to some other sort of formation? I mean, tonight we saw the 4-4-2 at a necessity, but is this something that could stick going forward? Or do we go back to what Luchi has shown once he gets Jimero Montero and Carlos Grueso back?
Yeah, and I think, Alex, you said it right. The fact that they're playing 4-4-2, you had Benji playing as a true wide midfielder. He had defensive responsibilities. The graphic I saw on Apple TV was that Toronto was putting 86%, at least in the first half, of their attacking plays down that right-hand side through the channel and the wing. And so he clearly had some responsibilities as a defender. You had Cade sort of playing as a second forward. It would have been interesting to see those guys switch it up a little bit now and again. Maybe that would have been enough to sort of spur one of them to do, to kind of, play to their strengths. But we didn't see that, and that might just be based on the tactics that they were instructed to follow. So maybe, did Benji just play poorly, or did Benji just not sort of rise to the challenge? Or was he just in a position that didn't suit him? And I Alex, I know you would say part of that most of the time Benji, and I think I agree with you there. But I also think the 4-4-2 looked kind of uncomfortable for a lot of different players out there, and I don't think that allowed folks to play at their best, because of the necessity of that formation. So,
Alex, we're over a month into the season here. We still have this lingering question about Cade Cowell and Benji Kikanovic, right? This far in. I mean, if you're looking into the next match for the Quakes, who are you starting at that position, or who are you putting in there? Who's your guy?
I think I have to keep Cade Cowell in there. I don't think Benji Kikanovic did enough tonight to warrant a start on that left wing. There's a fun comment here that I want to highlight that says one of our audience members here is watching tonight without knowing the score, and I'm curious what this audience member now thinks the score is, having listened to the show for 5 minutes. I am thinking that we maybe are giving the impression that the Quakes lost tonight. They did not, in fact, lose tonight, but it felt like one of those draws that was a loss.
Are you sure? I don't know. It kind of felt like an L to me.
Exactly. It felt like the Quakes left points on the table in this one. And Cade Cowell was one of those guys who had chances. And we have to go to Luchi now, but we'll talk more about that.
All right. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us tonight. We're ready here with Luchi Gonzalez. So let's go take a first question from Robert Jonas.
Thanks, Luchi. Sort of a tough result tonight, given the circumstances. A home game against a very depleted Toronto team. Is this the kind of draw that feels like a lost opportunity? And what was it that the team was missing tonight to get to all 3 points? Thank you.
I mean, we've had our challenges as well with injuries and also missing guys. So, definitely, I think both Toronto and us had challenges in that regard. But look, I'm happy with some of the things we created in terms of our expected goals. I think we definitely created enough chances to score at least a goal. We defended very well collectively and individually, so shutting down a few of their key guys, and that's important. If we can have an effort like that consistently defensively, things will bounce our way offensively, I believe, in our process. And it did not. So yeah, we are disappointed not to have scored and put one of those chances away to win the game and get the maximum 3 points. So and we at home expect that. So but look, it was there. It was close. And we got to keep pushing. We got to analyze it and see what little details to improve so that would have bounced our way and maximize the points. But we'll rest and we'll regroup, and we have a great opportunity to make up those points against Houston next week and prepare for that.
Next question, Jamin Moore. Jamin, we'll come back to you. Next question, Michael Robertson.
All right, Coach. When you have a situation like that with the tie here at home, are you worried about that coming back to bite you later on in the season, or do you just look at it as we played well on defense and we just couldn't get the goal to the back of the net, the ball to the back of the net?
Yeah, like I said before, in the short term, these games at home. So in the locker room, there was definitely happy faces. We want to win these games at home in front of our fans and family. So, but at the same time, we got to grab points. It's a long point. Adding points and adding to the sum in any ways is going to be positive. So, I think that's key. And like I said about the next one against Houston, that's the next focus. We can't control what happened now, but we can control how we approach the next game to push things a little bit farther so that we can capitalize on chances we create, and we put another defensive effort like we did tonight. And then look, Toronto, they have some good individual players. Even though they're missing guys, they had a player like Bernardeschi that can create. Vasquez, and then Michael in the middle is always going to be difficult to close down and take away their possession. But I'm happy with the effort of the guys, and we pushed the game. If you look at our expected goals, the second half, I mean, we were pushing the game. We were unlucky not to score one of those. So we got to create more of them. Sure, let's do it. But we also want to be efficient with our chances. So let's keep working and show consistency and believe that it'll bounce our way the next time.
Next up, Alex Morgan.
Hi, Luchi. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Thanks for joining us tonight. I want to ask about that left side of the attack. You have Benji Ukanovic, you have Cade Cowell. Neither of them have been able to log a goal or an assist this season, not for the lack of creating chances on that left side. What were your thoughts about their performances tonight, getting to see both of them on the field at the same time? And, do you want to see more from them? What do you think they can do more to improve that end product?
Yeah, look, Benji and Cade, it was a different look tonight to have them together on the field and look to create and use their verticality, use quick combinations and their high energy. Yeah, we have to keep working. They have such high ceilings, both of them in different ways. And, I think the volume was there in terms of runs in behind and getting in, both Benji and Cade had one-on-one moments, edge of the box. Can we turn those into a cross? Can we turn those into a shot with a combination or cutting inside or getting in the box and receiving across from the other side from Christian or Capo? So, and then building relationships with the left fullback. In this case, it was Paul Marie, Jabo. So, I think there's a lot of potential there for both of them. They're both young still in the league and they want to reach their potential just like me as their coach. So, but I'm happy with their mentalities. They're working hard, and there's little details that we can adjust together with the team so that they can show efficiency and effectiveness. Believe me, they want to score, they want to assist just as bad as we or the team or myself want them to. So we got to keep working on that for sure. But they have all the capacity.
Take a couple more questions. Next up, Kevin Guillen.
Hey, Coach. I wanted to ask you about going up against someone like Bob Bradley. What are your thoughts on an occasion like that? And how did his side end up approaching the game tactically? Like, did anything surprise you? Yeah, your thoughts on that.
Yeah, but Bob have had quite a few games now against him over the years when he was at LAFC and now with Toronto in preseason and this game tonight. But utmost respect for Bob. He's a legend, national team and MLS. So he's someone that I've been in touch with personally and through my journey, he's had a connection with me and he's been a mentor to me. So I appreciate the relationship. And it's a big honor to every time I get to coach against him. So, and in my competitive nature, I want to beat him every time. And I'm sure he wants to do the same, but no, nothing but respect. I'm always excited to coach against a legend like Bob. And then tactically, he puts a lot of footballers together in terms of the technical side. He gets false wingers or midfielders together, and they make it difficult when they connect passes and put a sequence together that you have to defend and shift and get pressure on the ball, and they break it, repress. So, he knows to put good technical, smart players together, and they controlling the game that way I thought it was a back and forth in terms of possession, and so obviously I'll give them credit for that.
Next question, Jamin Moore.
Hi, Luchi. Sorry I wasn't able to hear the first part of the press conference, so sorry if this got asked, but I wanted to talk a little bit about the difficulty, I think, getting balls in behind. Notice before the game in terms of through balls statistics, there hasn't been as many of those as there has been like crosses and cutbacks and ways of getting around the outside with Christian Espinoza, for instance. But, they seem pretty compact tonight. But do you feel that you need to test the back line through the middle of the field in order to put more variety of pressure against the back line? Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, you said it already. Toronto had good compactness defensively, almost like in this 4-5-1. And it's not easy to break lines, especially centrally when they have the extra number centrally. So I thought we were better and more effective in terms of rotating the ball and starting the attack on one side, finishing it on the other to create attacks, and then overloads 2 versus 1 wide with the fullbacks and our wingers, and that gave us more volume of crosses. And then look, in terms of getting in behind, a lower block or a compact block, it's not easy to get in behind. So we have to do better to play around them and between them. But look, expected goals was a decent number. Wasn't enough to score. So can we get more connection between the cross and the run in the box? So that last kind of pass, that last cross, that last final product. Tommy's there almost for the rebound. Buda's getting in the box in the weak side. Abel's in the box with possessions, trying to get shots off. Christian getting really good volume of crosses, but against a lower center back, a lower fullback, it's not easy. But yeah, we definitely want to improve that so that we can be more efficient next time.
And one final question in Spanish by Carlos Yusis.
Luchi, buenas noches. Bueno, lo contesté ya un poquito en inglés, pero da la sensación de que te puedes ir satisfecho porque defensivamente el equipo se vio muy bien, se vio muy compacto, comienza a tener más control del juego en el segundo tiempo y bueno, un poquito también lo de la semana pasada, ¿no? Que puedes crear situaciones buenas, situaciones de calidad, pero por mala suerte o por falta de puntería no las pueden terminar, ¿no?
Sí, contento con el esfuerzo defensivo individualmente y colectivamente. No conceder en casa es importante. Y haciendo eso te da la oportunidad de meter un gol y ganar, ¿no? Pero no se dio. La expectativa de gol, la estadística fue positiva, 1.9, algo así, casi 2. O sea que tuvimos la oportunidad, calidad en la oportunidad para meter por lo menos un gol, pero no se dio. Tenemos que seguir mejorando en la creatividad, en la impredecibilidad para crear oportunidades y ser eficaz, ¿no? con las oportunidades. Pero ahí podemos seguir creciendo. Tenemos un equipo joven y con hambre y ¿por qué no podemos mejorar? Y vamos a tratar de hacer eso ahora próximo contra Houston.
All right, thank you everyone for the questions. We'll be having a player here momentarily.
Buenas noches. Good night.
Interesting stuff. Really love the question from Jamin about the difficulty getting the balls in behind, right? Because we know that Luchi has been talking about figuring out ways to break lines since preseason. Like that's the one thing that he's been hitting on again and again and again with this team. And then we had the question from you as well, Alex, on Caden Benji. You went right for the jugular there. Was it, as Carlos said, mala suerte, or was it something else? Like what's going on here? Is this team just not finding the that one ball to get to get put into the back of the net, or is it just like they're there and they're not able to accomplish it, as Luchi said, like just being a little more clinical in that that final third? I mean, what are your thoughts here in regards to what he said, particularly about Caden Benji and then just missing those chances?
Look, I'm willing to believe that there was a little mala suerte tonight. That's plausible. The Quakes, according to some of the XG charts we've seen, had 1.6 to 1.8 XG. So you'd expect them on most nights to be able to put the ball in the back of the net with a couple of those Rodriguez headers, quite possibly. But for Cade and Benji, I don't think there was any issue with their luck. As you heard Luchi Gonzalez say, it was their decision-making in the final third. It was when they got the ball at the top of the box, one-on-one with their defender, and they can't make anything out of it. They run straight into their defender, they take it down the line, and they lose the ball, or they get it caught under their feet. They're not getting the ball, taking a touch inside, shooting. They're not getting the ball, taking a step, beating their man. They're not getting a ball and making a quick pass and doing a 1-2. They're not doing any of those things. And that's not luck. That's, issues with their decision-making and their touch and their concentration in the final third. And I think we heard somewhat contradictory things about that in the press conference. We heard him say
guys,
they had
we're
potential
joined now
and capacity, which are two different things.
Christian will be answering questions in both Spanish and English, so feel free to ask however you prefer. Let's go with the first question from Alex Morgan.
Hi, Christian. Thank you for joining us tonight. It's good to speak with you. What do you think was the issue tonight with putting the ball in the back of the net? Do you think it was for lack of creating chances? Do you think it was an issue with the finishing? What do you think was the difference between scoring and not being able to put the ball on the goal tonight?
I think I was a little bit unlucky because we had 2 or 4 or 5 clear chances to score. Well, I remember right now the Benji in the first half, then Kate in the second half, also Carlos Acapo, Jackson shooting from outside the 18. So I think that tonight was a little bit unlucky for us. We create a couple chances to score, but we couldn't.
Thank you, Christian. Next question, Kevin Guillen.
Hey, Christian. I was wondering, with Carlos and Jaime like both out of the midfield, what were you guys being asked to do tactically today against Toronto?
I think that we tried to press them, to force them to play wide, and then make our style to press. We were working the whole week pressing in a 4-4-2, so we changed that way to play, and I think that we did a great job today.
Next up, Jamie Moore.
Hey, Christian. Nice to talk to you. Congratulations on the point and the clean sheet. Defensively, it felt like you guys did enough to earn the point tonight. In the attack, it felt disjointed at times, and particularly, I think, in the first half, it seemed that the team was struggling to find each other in the final third, but maybe you grew into the game as you went. What were the challenges that you were facing with this Toronto team that you think were making the attack not come together as well as it can tonight?
Yes, I am agree with you. In the first half, we can to connect each other, but I think that was because in the first half, normally the other teams come with a lot of energy, but we know it that to the second half they're gonna drop that energy, so we can create more chances to score, and that was what happened on the field. But today we can to connect a couple crosses and the other chances that we had. So, but we are happy with this point, with the clean sheet too, and we had to keep growing.
Next question, Marko Nikolovic.
Hi, Christian. Thanks for taking time to talk to us. It just seemed like when you guys had your chances, especially down low in their zone, there was just some mistiming with passes, whether we were centering them or off to the side. In this instance, do you miss a guy like Montero who usually centers your guys' midfield, and maybe you had to do maybe a little too much than what you normally do tonight in this game? Thank you.
Yes. Obviously, we always wanna miss the players like Shamiro, because there is like the connection between the midfielders with the strikers. But today, I think that Jackson did a great game, and also to do it like double job, no? Working defensively and also in an attacking way. So yes, we miss Shamiro, but I think the guys did a great job too.
Now let's take a couple more questions. Next up, we'll take one from Michael Roberson.
All right. So when you have this tie situation like this, are you looking at it as a positive or is it a negative, especially if it's at home? And how do you build on this, knowing that you guys had some great opportunities, but they just didn't go in the goal?
No, we are working always in different situations. Not only when the teams come and press high, and also when the teams come here and defend almost the entire game, trying to find some counterattack. So today, as the Colorado game, they dropped the defensively line too deep, and that was very difficult to break down that line of four defensive. So but I think that we managed the ball very well, and we created a couple of chances to score. So I think that wasn't a bad game for us. It was a good point, and as I said before, we had to keep going.
Next question, Robert Jonas.
Gracias. You mentioned how this week you and the team practiced in a 4-4-2. It did look a little kind of unfamiliar out there for guys. The connections and the chemistry didn't quite seem to be there. If this is a formation that you'll need to use in games moving forward, what are some of the improvements you'd like to see from you and the teammates to be able to be effective in that formation?
I don't know. Maybe that question is for Luchi because he's the coach. He's the man who take the decisions to play 4-4-2 or 4-3-3. So sorry, but I can answer that question. It's not depend of me. That's depend of Luchi and his staff.
Thank you, Cristian, and thank you everyone for your questions. And we'll stay in touch for the next video with week of availability. Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Yeah, when he mentioned that they had been practicing in that 4-4-2, I was thinking the same thing. So I actually really appreciate that you asked that question, Robert, but it's a little disappointing that we didn't get a little bit more out of it and that he kind of deflected over towards Luchi Gonzalez to be able to answer that for us. One thing I wanted to go back to, Alex, because you were talking right before Christian came in and we were talking about mala suerte. And it's interesting because one of the first things Christian said when he was answering your question was what? That they were unlucky during the course of those opportunities. So I wanted to give you a chance to kind of reflect on that response that he had, maybe kind of finish up the thoughts that you had. And then Robert, I'd like to hear from you after that.
Look, I'm glad that the audience appreciates my candor because I'm going to be blunt and honest right now. I think that the team needs to demand more of themselves than that. I was surprised that Espinoza seemed happy with that draw, seemed willing to take the point in that game. He said, I think he said verbatim, correct me if I'm wrong, we're happy with that draw. And, seems like a lot of our audience was not happy to hear that because we had at least 15, 20 people leave this stream in the middle of that press conference. Because, look, it was frustrating to hear that after such a frustrating game where it felt like the Quakes needed to be asking more questions and needed to be on the front foot. For them to be willing to accept that draw is weird. I have higher expectations of this team, of what I think they can be and the level at which I think they can achieve this season. I don't think this game was good enough, and I'm surprised that was the tone that this press conference took. So there's my brutally honest assessment.
Jamin pointed something out to us in our and when he was messaging us during the press conference, and that is, according to FOTMob, the expected goals for the team was 1.8, and you could account that to like bad luck in this case. Now, good teams don't blame their losses or draws on bad luck throughout the season. That's the thing, right? They create their own luck.
So. Yeah, good teams don't need. You don't find themselves in that situation where they're trying to get a last gasp goal to nick a win. You look at a good team like St. Louis City FC, they're beating teams 3-0, 4-0, left and right. They're scoring multiple goals in the first half, putting teams on the back foot, playing high pressure football. Teams like that aren't worried about one or two missed chances in the final third. It's because the Quakes, aren't creating dangerous enough chances. We've seen them play direct down the middle before. I think there was a stat on Twitter about how they had the most progressive passes of any team in Major League Soccer in the first 4 games of the year. That signals how vertical they can play, how much Luchi Gonzalez has changed this team. They weren't doing that tonight. And, without that number 10, they haven't been finding those direct balls up the middle. And that's why they were relying on luck tonight.
Yeah. And Robert, kind of curious as to what you think here too. There were some nuggets there that we got from Christian.
Yeah.
There was a bit there from Luchi too. I know you didn't have a chance to reflect, on what he had to say as well.
Well, when I kind of put both of those together, and this sort of, I think, dovetails, Alex, to what you're saying, the Quakes should have come out the favorites in this game. They should have played like they were the favorites. But, you know, Toronto was a weakened team. But then Luchi said, oh, but we were weakened too. And, you know, Christian's talking about, you know, this week playing the 4-4-2, but clearly implying that it's, you know, it was challenging to sort of rise to the occasion when you're using that tactical setup on such a short notice. I almost feel like, you know, there were conversations around this game being like, okay, we're playing, you know, for the draw. We deserve at least a draw, and hopefully we'll get a win out of it. As opposed to we're at home, and sure, we're missing a couple players, but we're at home and we've got guys who know what they're doing, and we're going to go out there and beat a team that's coming from the East Coast and get these 3 points. I mean, these kind of games, especially in Major League Soccer, if you're playing a team 3 time zones away, you're supposed to win those games. You know, the mentality perhaps didn't come through in those press conference responses, and maybe that wasn't the mentality they had leading into this game. And Alex, that might go very well with you know, what you're observing here.
Yeah, that actually makes a lot of sense considering their response in the press conference. So, Alex, I wanted to kick it over to you one more time before we make our way over to the final thoughts. Anything else that you wanted to add after the press conference here?
I mean, look, there were some positives in terms of seeing Judson take the field, and I was regretful that wasn't asked to Luchi in the press conference about what he thought about Judson's performance, because he is a guy who can come in and if he's fully fit, play in that midfield and allow them to get back to the 4-3-3 formation in which they're more comfortable. So that was positive. Wish we'd had the opportunity to ask Luchi Gonzalez about that. And I mean, the only other thing from the press conference was the mixed messaging about Cade Cowell and Benji Kikanovic. That was the only other thing that stood out to me. The fact that on the one hand, you have Luchi Gonzalez saying that both of those players have the potential to be dangerous, decisive in the final third. And on the other hand, Luchi Gonzalez saying they have the capacity to do so. And because those are two different things. We know that Cade Cowell is good at having potential. He's very, very good at having potential, getting himself in dangerous positions and getting very close to scoring. But we haven't seen him. We don't know if he's good at, you know, putting the ball in the back of the net, at finishing those far post chances, at making 1-2s in the final third. He's getting better at some of those things. His service is getting better. I think his off the ball runs are getting better. But we don't know if he's good at those things yet consistently. And he'll need to be consistently good if he wants to go to Europe. And there was a big article in the Daily Mail this week about the fact that he wants to move to Europe. He had a quote that was, I think, more bullish than we've ever heard Cade Cowell. He said, and I quote, "I am ready to go to Europe. I feel like I have done enough in San Jose to earn that move to Europe." And in the basis of these first 5 games of the season, I don't know if you can say that's true. You know, he's had potential, but I think it'll be difficult to secure that move to Europe that he wants if he, you know, hasn't put the ball in the back of the net or contributed to a goal or assist by the time summer rolls around.
Yeah, that's quite interesting, actually, because I'm wondering if Cade were to go to Europe, like exactly how much of that potential he could unlock, right? Like, is it still too early for him to make that move? Because this is the same story time and again. There are some players who get those opportunities, they go off to Europe and they don't quite find it when they get there, or perhaps they come up through the system and then they end up over here in MLS. You know, thinking somebody like Terrence Boyd, for example, who never quite found his footing, had some good appearances, didn't quite find it, came over here, he's back over there. I'm wondering, like, if Cade is at that point where he can actually find his way onto an 18, you know, if he makes that move over. So why don't we go ahead and get into the last segment of the show here, which is the final thoughts. Robert, if you wouldn't mind starting us off here.
Well, we never mentioned his name, and neither did it come up in the press conference, but JT Marcinkowski with a second clean sheet here at PayPal Stadium. So I think that's something that we should remember.
I hope Jamin Moore is watching right now.
I say it wasn't Daniel. It was definitely JT. And he made a couple of critical saves, critical stops there in the first half. Didn't have a whole lot to do after that, as the Quakes defensive center backs, Jonah Mensah and Rodriguez, played really well well tonight, I think overall. And when you have two center backs playing that kind of game together, your goalie is going to have a nice night off. And that seems to be how the way the second half played off. So I'm going to kind of lead with that. It's a clean sheet. It's a point earned by the defense. The offense didn't do their job, and so they lost the other 2 points tonight. But JT and the defense did everything asked of them and did a fantastic job. And who knows, Rodriguez was playing like he needed a goal to trigger a contract extension or something tonight, and almost made it happen. And like you said, if that's your best offensive player coming out of your back line, then okay, then again, it's up to the offense to step it up next week in Houston.
And the most entertaining moments of the night, JT Marcinkowski's flying header in the first half. I don't think I've ever seen anything like that.
It was stunning, and I think it even caught the Toronto player off guard a little bit.
Yeah, it reminded me of, it was Robin Van Persie, World Cup 2014. Goal against Spain, just like that. JT Marcinkowski was
a little further out, but
yeah, almost.
All right, Alex, what are you thinking here as we end the show, heading over to the next home match on April 1st against the Houston Dynamo? What are your closing thoughts?
Well, look, a lot of people were very negative and pessimistic after the result against St. Louis City SC last weekend. They lost 3-0. So, of course, people were going to be a little dejected after that game. And what I said after that game was, I'm going to reserve my judgment. I'm going to hold my judgment until the Quakes play Toronto. When they're back at home, when they're playing against an Eastern Conference team that's going to be missing a lot of players. And I think this game is, I said last week, I think this game would be more representative of the San Jose Earthquakes we're going to see this season. And that worries me a little bit because on the basis of this performance, this is going to be a team that's scraping to get in the playoffs once again this year. This was not the performance of a team that is confidently challenging for the top of the Western Conference. This wasn't a team pushing the tempo. This wasn't a team in control and willing to take the game by the scruff of the neck. They weren't doing that tonight, and that doesn't mean they don't have the potential to do that. But it's still missing. It's still missing in the final third, and they're going to need to inject more intensity into the final third. I mean, there's positives, right? I thought Luchi Gonzalez mentioned the overlaps down the wings. You had overlaps from Akapu, you had overlaps from Palmieri. That was creating dangerous opportunities with those overloads on the wing. So they're doing things right. It's just not clicking. And I think having Jamir Montero back in the starting lineup next week will be huge because he's a guy who facilitates that vertical play and who can create those chances in the final third and set up his teammates in good positions. And, if you have Jamir Montero setting you up on a plate, maybe you don't even have to ask Cade Cowell or Benji Gukanovic to do as much as they were asked to do tonight. So, there are those positives, but just the overall energy that I took away from this game wasn't where I wanted to be tonight. Maybe it was because Cade Cowell shaved the mustache. Maybe the mustache was bringing the vibes, and now because the mustache is gone, the Quakes didn't have the vibes anymore. Maybe it was that. Am I wrong, Phil?
Yeah, I don't know, man. It's time will tell. Time will tell. I think we need to see at least one more match. So I need to see that. Ben made a comment about my mustache area, and the lighting it's really bad. I swear it looks better in person.
It looks pretty good. If you're sitting right here, it's pretty.
Yeah,
it's pretty.
But I can see what you're saying, Ben. It's not. Yeah, I don't want to comment any more on that.
I have to. So the only other thing I have to do before we have is I have to give Jamin Moore an opportunity to respond because I called him out. Jamin Moore has been talking about in the little producers chat we have back here, JT Marcinkowski and Danielle. And I will say it is true that JT Marcinkowski did not face a high volume of shots tonight. That's something that Jamin has mentioned in the battle between Danielle and JT Marcinkowski in the Quakes goal so far. But he did make a really, really key save in that first half. And I think this game could have looked different if JT Marcinkowski didn't make that save.
He made every save he was called to make. That's what you want your goalkeeper to do.
I want to leave that discourse open and allow Jamin to return to that the next time he's on the show.
So the last thing I was thinking about as we head into the match against Houston was how affected Jackson Yule was in this match. I know we didn't talk a whole lot about that, but the loss of Carlos Grueso has definitely impacted Jackson's play. And I just thought, well, for one, under Luchi Gonzalez's system, I think Jackson has looked a lot better overall. However, with Carlos Grueso playing at a higher level, I think the first match he was still kind of like settling into the team. We didn't see his best, but as the matches were progressing, as the season was progressing, we were seeing better play from Grueso, and Yule was looking a lot better as a result. So even with Jamiro Montero coming back, there's still that question mark for me. Like, is Yule going to be able to find his position? Is he going to be able to find himself within the system as he had when Grueso was there? So that's a lingering question for me. And I think it's really important. You know, Alex, you had mentioned earlier about finding, those passes, getting in behind defenses. And actually, Jamin asked about that in the press conference. And I think you get that from Jackson when he is most comfortable, when he finds this position with the team, when he gets settled in and he can rely on the guys playing behind him to have those defensive duties taken care of. And he doesn't necessarily have to do that himself. So that's something I'm really going to be looking towards when the Quakes take on Houston next week. Should they have Jamiro Montero ready to go by that time with Jackson Yule in the midfield? I think that's going to be a big question to be answered. So the last thing I wanted to mention as we close out the show, make sure you check out quakesepicenter.com. If you go to quakesepicenter.com, you can find the salary spreadsheet written by Colin Etnier, so you can find out how the budgeting is currently working with the team, what the roster has room for, and the current capacities in terms of designated players, GAM and TAM, and at least what we are giving our best estimate as to what that looks like at the moment. You also want to check out the Patreon, as you see at the bottom of the screen here. For just $2 a month, you can become a patron who gets early access to the content that we are releasing, whether it's the photos that traditionally were released in the past by Aaron Morgan, our photographer. We do have some new content that will be coming up. My wife, Sarah, was down on the field today taking some photos for Quakes Epicenter, so we will have some of that available as well. We have the articles that are written by Robert Jonas, Jamin Moore, Alex Morgan, Asher Cohn, Colin Etnier, and Nate Patel. There's a lot of great stuff there as well. So make sure you go check that out. If you are willing to give $5 a month, you can also get access to the Patreon Slack, where you can join the conversation with all the hardcore Quakes Epicenter listeners and Quakes fans who are consistently giving their takes throughout the week, not just after the match. So if you're enjoying the YouTube chat right now, just imagine you can have access to this sort of conversation, banter, and fun throughout the week. So I do want to thank everybody for joining us tonight, for Robert Jonas and Alex Morgan, and for Jamin Moore for producing the show. I'm Phil Leyva, and I just wanted to say thank you for joining us and have a wonderful evening.